Thanks to Lady Mayor for tagging me in the back to browsing tag, which I'm going to do because it sounds fun. So, as is my wont, I've been overthinking it. So I thought I'd just get it bashed out and move on with my life, because it's actually came into my head as I woke up this morning at 4:30. I was like, So instead I listened to an audiobook and then got back to sleep at 6:30. Anyway, back to browsing. There are 4 questions, and in each of them it asks the tagged person to choose a book. One book. That's the challenge. So I've managed to do that, and there will be some honourable mentions, which I won't elaborate on. I'll just list them. I'll put them in the description below as well. And for some of the honourable mentions, I have recorded videos already. So where that's the case, I will put the thing up in whichever side it goes. You can follow up on that if you wish. So, without any further ado, let's get to the first question. Number 1. Magic of discovery. Share a book you found whilst browsing that you may not have discovered otherwise. So, first of all, honourable mention is going to be Assassin's Apprentice. First of the Farseer trilogy, which will come up later in the video in another question, so we don't need to elaborate on that. I'm going to go with A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. This is a historical fiction novel that I saw when I went into Padstow booksellers in Cornwall when I was down on holiday a few years ago. It's a story of a character called Count Rostov, who comes from the old guard, pre-revolutionary times, someone with an estate, someone with money, one of the gentry. I'll read the synopsis. On the 21st of June 1922, Count Alexander Rostov, recipient of the Order of St. Andrew, member of the Jockey Club, master of the hunt, is escorted out of the Kremlin, across Red Square, and through the elegant revolving doors of the Hotel Metropole. Deemed an unrepentant aristocrat by a Bolshevik tribunal, the Count has been sentenced to house arrest indefinitely. But instead of his usual suite, he must now live in an attic room while Russia undergoes decades of tumultuous upheaval. Can a life without luxury be the richest of all? So as I said, I walked into Padstow booksellers, I saw this, and if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you'll know that I'm a student of Russia. I love Russian literature. I speak the language. I love reading historical non-fiction about the revolution in particular. So this appealed to me as soon as I saw it. I hadn't heard of the author before, and I bought it on a whim, just having seen it as I was browsing, which is exactly what the question's about. And I read it, I think in 2021, maybe 22, can't remember exactly, but whichever year it was, it became my book of the year. The writing is exquisite. It's quite literary. It's beautiful prose, and the plot, well, it's described well in the back. We've got a guy who finds himself living under house arrest, basically, in a posh hotel where he had a suite before the revolution, and he had everything brought to him. He had all the luxuries one could want. And then to go from that to living in a garret room, tiny, up above, with no luxuries, no privileges. And he gets to make friends with some of the people in the hotel, particularly a little girl who's the daughter of a hotel guest, and he gets to know the machinations of how the hotel works. And he's not allowed to leave. If he leaves, then his life is forfeit, basically. So it's how he manages to change from having been aristocrat into persecuted, I guess, and to lose all one's possessions and to remain in the same building, but as a different person, kind of. So it's intriguing, it's fascinating. They made a TV show of it with Ewan McGregor, and I watched the first episode. It wasn't bad, it was just, I don't know, part of this book's charm is the prose, so that didn't really come across in the TV show, and it's one that I will definitely be returning to. And in fact, when I went back to Padstow again last year, I went back into the same bookshop and I bought another Amor Towles book. This is a signed one, a short story collection, which I've yet to read, so I'm looking forward to that. So that was question 1. Question 2. Expanding worlds. Share a book that's made you view things from a different perspective or exposed you to new ideas. So this was a challenging one. First of all, honourable mention. We're back in Russia. Historical fiction. So, Revolution of Marina M by Janet Fitch. I won't elaborate any more on that since it's only the honourable mention. Let's instead come back to Assassin's Apprentice, or the Farseer trilogy in general. This could have been in the first question because I did find it while browsing, also in Cornwall. And when I first read it, I've read it now 3 times, I think, perhaps 4, not sure. When I first read it, I was at a point in my life where I'd started to think about art in particular. That was really where it began. And that eventually became, with more thinking, a way of me to consider my relationship to the universe, or to God, or to something bigger. I wasn't quite sure what to call it. And as I finished the trilogy, I found myself one day writing an email to my then girlfriend, now wife, trying to explain to her the skill, which is the magic system in this book. Now, I have made a video on the skill and the wit, which are the 2 magic systems in the Farseer trilogy, and then further on into the Tawny Man and beyond. And in that explanation, which I still have, I found myself trying to explain the idea that I suppose both the magic systems allow one to connect to a higher power. It's a way of imagining that we are all connected as humans, and beyond, that humanity and beyond, that our spirit is connected in ways that we can't possibly know. And I think Robin Hobb in these books is trying to use that idea, which, you know, is not a new idea, but she's taken this idea of connectedness and made it into a magic system in a fantasy book that has rules. And I already know, I'm now having just finished The Golden Fool, which is the second of the Tawny Man trilogy, that the system evolves as Hobb writes more of the books, and we learn more of the story of the main characters who have these magics, that they have evolved in beautiful ways, and so I'm intrigued to carry on. I haven't finished the Tawny Man, I've still got the 3rd book to go, Fool's Fate, and I'm sure that with the trilogy that comes again after that, the name of which I don't know, I think there are 9 books that follow Fitz's arc, and then there are 4, 5, 6, 7 books that follow the live ship traders, etc., Dragonhaven and all that. So it's just fascinating the way that this magic system fed into me at a time when I was ready to hear it, and it ties in particularly with my sobriety, which I'll mention briefly in another honourable mention in a bit. So, Assassin's Apprentice, the Farseer trilogy in general, exposed me to new ideas or made me think of ideas in a different way. That's what I love about these books. Question 3. Open to change. Share a book that has changed who you are as a person or altered your day-to-day habits. So, I could quite easily, this is the book that definitely fits that description the best, but it's going to be an honourable mention for reasons which I'll explain. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been sober since 2005. I got sober through AA and it was done through this book. I have recorded a video about it, so I'll just share that link up there and you can go watch that if you're interested. And I didn't want to choose this as the answer to this question because I'd rather go with a fiction book for this, I think, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose the first book in a series of 5 of children's literature. The Book of 3 by Lloyd Alexander. First of the Chronicles of Prydain. And the reason I'm picking this is because when I first read this, I was in primary school, probably about 9 or 10. Primary 6 with Mrs. Welsh, and she read this to us as a class, and I feel like it changed my life. It got me interested in fantasy, which I suppose in a way I had already been a little bit, in as much as having read The Wishing Chair and The Enchanted Wood by Enid Blyton. But I think this was really the one that got me into the idea of epic fantasy based on mythology, which these are. And as I said, this is the first of 5. I have them all here, ready to read and to make a review of on my channel, along with some other children's literature as well. Because I'm fascinated to revisit my childhood influences and see how they stack up in today's world as a 50-plus-year-old man who loves fantasy books, as we've already discussed. So these, based on Welsh mythology, and they follow a young character called Taran, who lives on a farm called Caerdolban. It's owned by a sort of dwarf kind of guy called Dolben. And he grows up there with... He wants to become a hero, basically. So it's a hero's journey in that regard. On the farm there is an oracular pig, which as a 9-year-old or 10-year-old I wasn't quite sure what that meant. But now I'm a bit more clued up, having just read the Odyssey. I know what an oracle is. The pig is called Hen Wen, and it's got a bard in it called Fluder Flam, with 2 Ds, so it's probably pronounced as like the, TH as in the, Fluther. There's a baddie called the Horned King. I remember as a kid drawing the Horned King based on the skull picture there, just there. And there's a wee monkey-like creature called Gurgi, who speaks with funny rhyming slang. And the book follows on with The Black Cauldron, which I also read at that age. This is the one that gave its title to the Disney film, which was dreadful. Please don't watch it. And that gave the idea of the Cauldron Born, which is these zombie-like creatures here, where you put corpses into the cauldron and then they come back out as warriors, zombie warriors. So I remember drawing that as well as a kid. So that's what I'm going to pick as books that changed who I am, because ever since then I've read fantasy as my number one kind of genre for escapism. So there you go. Other honourable mentions, I'm just going to show you this one, The 7 Hanged by Andreev, which led to a kind of spiritual awakening, and I've done a video about that. Am I getting the right side? One day I'll get the hang of that. So you can watch that if you're interested in how a Russian short story changed my life. And another one which I should have got off the shelf and didn't is Oblomov by Goncharov, another Russian literary novel from the 19th century, which, yeah, changed my life. So, that's question 3. My screens have gone off. Okay, question 4. Browse a bookstore, library or a friend's shelves and talk about a book you found. So, for this one, I've gone with Titus Grown by Mervyn Peake, first of the Gormenghast trilogy. These books were on the shelf of an old school friend of mine. He recommended it to me, and so I bought these in the same shop where I bought Assassin's Apprentice, actually, in Cornwall. I've got the trilogy, and I read it first time round, probably around about 2000, about the same time as I read the Farseer trilogy, actually. So I bought them in the same shop, and I read them about the same time when I was working abroad. And Titus Grown, again, is a very literary, how would you call it, gothic fantasy, I suppose. The prose is absolutely wonderful. And on my first read, I wasn't quite ready for such beautiful prose. I mean, I did get a lot out of it, but it's the kind of book that you really get a lot more out of the second and third times, which I have done, and I'm actually quite keen to buy them again. There's a beautiful hardback bound illustrated edition that's on Amazon for 30 quid. I think it's an anniversary edition, which I've been having in my tabs. I keep looking at it. There's also a Folio Society trilogy hardback illustrated set, but it's 150 quid, so, you know, for 3 books that seems a bit much. So I think the illustrated hardback of the trilogy in a single volume is possibly the way to go. They're based on a castle called Gormenghast, which itself is almost like a character of the book. The first 2 novels, they're set entirely around this castle. It's almost as if the world beyond doesn't exist. It doesn't feature in any part of the story. And it follows the firstborn son or the heir of Gormenghast called Titus Grown, who's the son of the Earl of Gormenghast, Earl Sepulchrave. And he's born into the castle, and then we learn all about the rituals that are ingrained in the society of the castle. There's a master of ritual who's in charge of making sure that the ritual's followed to the letter. And the ritual is the most important thing. There's a daughter as well, Titus's big sister, Fuchsia, kind of teenage girl, and she has a big part to play. Titus's mother, a cat lover lady, fantastic character. We've got Flay, who's kind of a butler type character, skinny with knees that make noises like gunshots. We've got the chef, big, horrible, fat, ugly, disgusting person. The characters, and the sisters, the twins. We've got Prune Squaller, the doctor. Yeah, I really need to read these again, because even as I remember these names now. Swelter, that's the chef. And it all kind of gets changed about when a young upstart of a boy comes along and decides to start messing about with the rituals. He's a social climber, this guy. He's a sociopath. His name is Steerpike. and he starts to worm his way into relationships with all the different characters in order to work his way up into different parts of the castle's hierarchy. And he causes all kinds of problems. So he's Machiavellian, I would say. Not only would I say that, that's what it says on the back here, I believe. Yes, let me read the synopsis. Titus Groan, heir to Lord Sepulchrave, has just been born. A Groan of the strict lineage, Titus is 77th. He will inherit the miles of rambling stone and mortar that form Gormenghast Castle and its surrounding kingdom. His world will be predetermined by complex ritual, the origins of which are lost in time. It will be peopled by the dark characters who inhabit the half-lit corridors. Lord Sepulchrave, a figment of melancholy, and his red-haired countess. Swelter the chef and his bony enemy Flay, Prune Squaller, castle physician, and his etiolated sister Irma, and Steerpike, the Machiavellian youth. Dreamlike, fantastic and macabre. Mervyn Peake's extraordinary novel, the first in the Gormenghast trilogy, is one of the most astonishing sustained flights of the imagination in modern English fiction. It is uniquely brilliant, and we are right to call it a modern classic. Anthony Burgess. So there you go, that's Gormenghast. Titus Groan is the first one, Gormenghast is the second, and Titus Alone is the third in the trilogy. Highly, highly recommended. These were picked from a friend's bookshelf. And that's me. So I'm going to close out by tagging someone. And I would like to reach out and tag the Mild Rumpus, because I haven't seen you post in a while. And I think this one, I'd be interested to see what your pick was for this tagged video. Thanks again to Lady Mayor for tagging me. If you want to go see her choices, I'll put a link in the description. You can see what she chose. And look forward to seeing your choices. The Mild Rumpus. Cheers. Speak to you later.